Well, hi there, and welcome to Pathways Connect, session 3, where we're looking at the Gospel of John. And today we're going to look at John chapter 4, and we're going to talk about Jesus' encounter with a Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. But before we actually look at her story, we need to look at a little bit of background. Why was there such a rift between the Jewish people and the Samaritans? Well, it goes right back to when Israel was divided into two different kingdoms under rival kings. In the north, there was Jeroboam, and in the south, King Rehoboam. Now, the northern kingdom, it initially had its capital in Shechem, which later became Samaria. Now, around about 722 BC, that northern kingdom fell to Assyrian conquerors. They took hold of that area and people were taken away and they were taken into captivity. Many people were slaughtered. And then the king of Babylon, he actually decided to reestablish that kingdom again with a whole bunch of foreigners. He brought in a whole bunch of people from other areas to overtake that area. And with them came all their pagan idols and their mixed beliefs and so on. So later the Samaritans actually built a temple there. Now, 100 years after that, Judah, the southern kingdom, also fell to Assyria. Now, we know it's recorded in the Bible that approximately 70 years later, it was about 430,000 exiles actually were allowed to return and rebuild Jerusalem. You might read some of those stories in Ezra and Nehemiah. And so they returned to build, but there was this animosity towards the Samaritans. They saw the Samaritans as pagans, they were idolatrous, they were impure because of all their mixed marriages. These people, to the Jewish mindset, were totally defiled, and the audacity that they had to even consider building a temple there. That was how they thought. So there was this hatred and there was this racial and ethnic tension that existed for hundreds of years. And this went well into Jesus' lifetime. That's why the story of the Good Samaritan that's recorded in Luke chapter 10, that's why it packs such an incredible punch to the Jews who were listening, because the true neighbour of that story, the Good Samaritan, was in fact a repugnant enemy to the Jew. So that brings us to our story today. That brings us to today's encounter between Jesus and a Samaritan woman in John 4. It starts by saying that Jesus needed to go through Samaria. Other translations say Jesus must needs to go. It's like it's a picture of urgency. But it's important to understand that Jesus actually didn't need to go through Samaria to get to where he was going. The fact was this, that most Jews would add an extra 20 miles to their trip, and they would travel through Perea to get to Galilee in order to avoid stepping on Samaritan soil. Such was the animosity that they felt that even the dirt of the Samaritan would defile them. So when Jesus is talking here, he says, I must needs go to Samaria. He was actually talking about a divine urgency, a compelling within him to do so. I think that's marvelous. I think that's wonderful to consider that for one woman. Jesus felt this compulsion to be able to go and share with her the message of the gospel. So Jesus and his disciples, they arrive at Jacob's well at 12 noon. It's about half a mile from Sychar, the main town. And he sits down there at Jacob's well to just refresh himself. He sends the disciples off to buy some food for lunch. And as he's sitting near the well, this woman comes along. Now, this well, Jacob's well, was actually at some crossroads. It was at a junction of roads. And I think that says something in itself, that people actually thirst for truth at the crossroads of life. So this Samaritan woman, she comes along. It really is an unusual time for her to fill her water pot. Why would you fill your water pot in the middle of the day? You'd either do it first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening. You'd avoid the heat. But I think this lady was actually avoiding something else. I think she came at that time because she was avoiding all the others in the community, the other ladies who might berate her or treat her badly. See, this lady had a reputation. This lady was a home wrecker. This lady was a lady of ill repute in their community. And so she just happens to come along when Jesus was there. How many of you know that there's no chance encounters, only spirit-directed opportunities when Jesus is involved? So Jesus does this thing. He asks her for a drink. And this is her response. This is basically what she said. She said, yeah, we Samaritans, we're the scum of the earth until you Jews actually want something from us. So let's read what actually takes place here at John 4. If you open up your Bibles, John 4, and we're looking at verses 10 to 15. This is what takes place. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. And the woman said to him, sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw. Interesting. It's amazing what Jesus does there. He starts by engaging her curiosity. He commits her to wanting to know a little bit more information. What's this water that this guy is talking about? You know, curiosity will often open people up to the truth. And so Jesus actually delves a little bit deeper here. He uses this metaphor of water, and that reveals her longing. He knew what to say so that the conversation would go past just polite superficiality. I think it's worth us pausing for a moment to think about that, and maybe we can consider these two questions. The first one's this: why is curiosity such an important key to reaching someone? And secondly, how do you dig deeper? How do you go just beyond polite conversation? Have you ever been in one of those situations where you're talking to someone and it just can't go beyond that just polite superficiality? How do we delve deeper? How do we get to a deeper place? Why don't you discuss that now? Let's continue to read from this story, John 4, and let's have a look at verses 16 to 26. Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband, come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have well said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands." Goodness. "And the one whom you now have is not your husband, in that you spoke truly." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is a place where one ought to worship." Notice she's changed the conversation. Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." And Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Wow, that's profound. Amazing things going on in this passage. Obviously, the conversation's getting a bit too close to this lady's heart. She's thinking, this guy knows everything about me, all the hidden details. And so she redirects the conversation. It's getting too awkward. It's getting too uncomfortable. And so she says, what about the temple? What about the temple? Is our temple the real place to worship, or is your temple the real place to worship? You see, the thing is that when we're reaching people with the gospel, it's bound to get to that place where brokenness has to be dealt with. So her response makes it clear that she doesn't want to go there. But Jesus then responds to her with an incredible statement, absolutely awesome. What he's basically saying is this, that, listen, at the end of the day, worship isn't about a religious temple. It's not about a religious tradition. Worship is actually about the intent of the heart. And then Jesus makes this incredible declaration. He says, I'm the answer. I'm the Messiah. I'm the one you're believing for. And at that point, the disciples return and they offer Jesus some food. So let's read on and let's discover what happens there in verses. Let's go from verse 32. The disciples come to him and say, do you want some of this food? And he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. Therefore the disciples said to one another, has anyone else brought him something to eat? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look to the fields, for they're ready, they're white for harvest. And he who reaps receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life, that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not laboured. Others have laboured, and you have entered into their labours. It's a great passage. Again, we learn something profound here about evangelism. Jesus gives his disciples some keys as to what it means to reach the lost. The first is this, is that spiritual nourishment actually comes when we share the message of salvation. And that in itself is so beautiful that I know many struggle with sharing the message of salvation, but there is a refreshing and there is an energizing and there is something of nourishment, spiritual nourishment that comes when we do that. The second thing is this, that there is a harvest available and it's in season and out of season. Jesus says, look, don't wait for the 4 months until it's harvest, that there's always, when it comes to winning the lost, there's always a season to win the lost. And the third thing he says is this, that he talks about both sowing the seed and reaping the harvest and how both of those things bring great reward. And I think that's important for us to understand that it's not just about reaping the harvest. For us to gather that harvest, it requires many to have sown the seed, and all are just as important as the other. This passage finishes with this Samaritan woman bringing others down to see Jesus. And Jesus actually stays there for a couple of days to minister the message of the gospel to them. Verse 41, I love verse 41, it says this, and many more believed because of his own word. Many more believed because of his own word. So I think it's important for us to understand that we need to keep sowing, we need to keep harvesting so that many people will respond to his word. We'll continue with our journey through John's Gospel next time. There's some prayer points coming up. God bless you.